All right, we are live. We're going to have a good conversation today, man. If you're watching this live, appreciate you being here. We're going to be talking about hard work, opportunity, equal opportunity, the role that education plays, and ultimately, is America a meritocracy where the people that work the hardest and are the smartest and the brightest make it to the top, or is it more of a nepotism where it's more about what family you're born into, who you know, all these types of things. A lot of fun stuff, so I think we'll probably piss everybody off depending on what side of the debate you fall on. But before we do that, I got to drop the intro one time.
Every time I'm with you, yo, it's something else. It's a fact, and it's nothing else. Got your hand out, you don't even need a help. Oh, I don't need nothing else. Every time I'm with you, yo, it's something else. It's a fact, and it's nothing else. Got your hand out, you don't even need a help. Oh, that's right. I don't need nothing else. That's right.
King Stream.
What's going on? It's Ruslan with KingStreamENT.com. This channel exists to encourage, empower, inspire you to live God's dream for your life. I hope you're having a fantastic Saturday afternoon. Hey, if you're watching this live, do me a solid. Make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Even if you're watching a replay, hit the subscribe, like button, turn the notification bell on. And if you're watching this live, let me know where you are watching this from. That helps me out a ton to kind of gauge where you guys are at. And liking this video helps it go up the algorithm gods, if you will. So, hey, today I'm going to have a good time. I got one of my good friends, someone that's been on the channel before. He hasn't been on the channel in a while. He's a communicator, a preacher of God's word. And is one of my good friends. And we're going to be talking about this idea of meritocracy versus nepotism, hard work, discipline, how it all plays together. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome my buddy, Mr. Daniel Golding. What's up, bud?
Man, good to be here. To all the virtual people online, I guess this is as close as we could get, even if we were in person with the world we're living in today, right?
Yeah, man. So me and you know each other from church. We were in the same local Bible study, same local community. We've done some ministry together.
Yeah.
You've preached at churches all over the country. Specifically, you were just a young adults pastor. You grew a ministry from 0 to 200 every week in a place that wouldn't really be known for young adults ministries. In where were you guys at? In Gilbert, Arizona?
Yeah, we would say Gilbert, but that's like if you live in Ramona and you say you're from San Diego, right? Like that's that barely San Diego. So we were on the outskirts of Phoenix, a little city called Queen Creek, and the crazy part is right before COVID hit, we actually finally crossed the 300 barrier. So
oh snap! You was getting 300 people every.
That's even before pastor math. So you put pastor math in there, we were at least 500-600. You double count the people in the sound booth, the band counts twice. Yeah,
that's great. Yo, so a lot of people know my story. I'm a refugee. I came out here from Azerbaijan, Baku, in '91. My family immigrated here. And my dad left, and me and my mom, we grew up in welfare and, poverty, the whole bit, got into a lot of trouble, got arrested as a kid. And thankfully, my mom had enough foresight to move us out of the neighborhood. I moved to North County, discovered I was going to go to the NBA, then discovered I wasn't going to go to the NBA, and then just kind of fell in music, got saved. My life's been amazing because of Jesus and because really relocating to a more positive area, if you will. This idea of hard work, smart work, paying off versus environment, who you know, what family you're born into is an interesting concept. But before we get into that, I wanted to you just give us like your quick, brief story, because you have a wild story, and I think it'll help add some context to this entire conversation.
Yeah. I guess the short version of my story is I grew up in a pretty normal upper middle class family, what I now understand as an upper middle class family. Mm-hmm. But again, when you're growing up, it's just your family. Grew up very sheltered and not around a lot of people that thought differently than me, looked different than me. And then, I was around a lot of excess and, eventually the excess kind of took control of my life. I I just thought I partied harder than most people, and then all of a sudden I wasn't able to control the partying any longer. Found myself in a place where I was going to rehab at 18 years old, and kind of shut my whole world down, and then get radically saved when I'm 19 and move up to North County and, meet you, start coming through the Bible study through a mutual friend of ours, Glenn, and all of a sudden I'm surrounded with a group of people that are nothing like me, look nothing like me, have experiences that have been drastically different than mine, and a lot of preconceived notions that I had about the way the world operated began to just kind of be shattered. And so, gosh, that was 13 years ago.
Yeah, time flies, man.
It's crazy. Yeah. At that point, we were all still single. I think you had just gotten married.
Yeah.
The rest of us fools were still single and just knuckleheads. And our prayer request of Bible study every week was for a wife. And,
So your dad is actually from the south side of Chicago.
Yeah.
And he is an attorney. And you grew up in a fairly affluent community. And as you were being a knucklehead and getting into trouble, we could talk about why on a different day. That's a whole nother topic. But as you were getting in trouble, you saw how things in your world kind of worked in terms of, hey, dad's an attorney, he makes a couple phone calls, and this little situation can kind of go away, right?
Yeah.
And just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Having a dad that was...
Well, you want to talk about some of the cases you caught as a juvenile?
For the record, the job I have now, you have to have, some type of government clearance stuff for. So all of those cases were never actually official. My dad knew some folks. So yes, having a dad that is a lawyer, specifically one that was on the prosecution side of the law for a long time, and having contacts in the system still was definitely helpful and beneficial. But I was just a knucklehead, man. Did all kinds of just dumb stuff. But the recurring thing that happened a few times to me was driving either under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and typically having a large quantity of those drugs on me at the time. And I can remember one time getting pulled over, and the cop knew, like literally was laughing that he knew how drunk I was, but just let me go. Was just like, hey man, just drive home. I had a situation like that where I actually got arrested and brought down to county, and handcuffed, and my dad came down and got me out, and not before he punched me while I was handcuffed, and punched me right in front of all the cops. Yeah, it was great. I'm looking at these cops like, yo, this is assault. Like, what are you doing? This dude just punched me. You're just gonna stand there. But the cops are like, you had it coming, and the crazy part is all those things just went away. Yeah. There's probably a good four times I should have had a DUI or some type of massive legal consequence, and nothing ever happened because of who my dad was. And watching my little brothers walk through the same stuff in their life. I mean, my one brother took a bunch of drugs, blacked out for a couple days, literally lit an apartment complex basically on fire, burned the whole thing, had all these arson charges. And at that point, my dad, because he caught himself a nice case, my dad had to hire, he had moved out of criminal defense at that point, and he had to hire him a legitimate attorney. But I was shocked when the judge was like, yeah, man, no big deal. You're just a kid figuring it out. And nothing. Had literally no charges, not even a misdemeanor put on his record when the dude was facing felony arson. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
you come from this life where dad's an attorney, you guys doing fairly well financially. Your dad didn't grow up with a silver spoon or any type of like generational wealth. He's legit like self-made, south side of Chicago, and becomes this attorney, and then like you guys kind of get to operate a little differently under the law. And then as you got into our Bible study and you kind of got woke, for lack of better terms, you discovered that there was this other world out there, that people are treated differently under the law, that it's not necessarily everybody can just kind of get their way out of a situation like that, and that some people even get treated more harshly under the law, whether it's because they're poor or because of the way they look. What is your perspective on these things now, kind of being on the other side? Because you told me like you kind of thought your upbringing was like normative, like this was normal, this is what everybody did.
Well, I remember when we started having conversations about racial tension and police brutality and all that stuff, even the concept of racism, I was completely against. If Glenn ever listens to this video, he can chime in and say how much. I mean, to say that I was ignorant is like the understatement of the year. But again, my entire framework, my worldview was, we had 3 or 4 black kids in my senior class of 500. Right. All of their families lived in the same communities, made the same amounts of money. Their dads had access to the same stuff that my family had access to. And so in my mind, it's like, man, we've made it, right? We're this progressive country. Racism is a thing of the past. We're all equal together. And then I start to look around, and it's like, well, there's 3 out of this class of almost 500. And I started to listen. The story that I remember for me made me really question stuff, because it deeply came into conflict with what I had experienced my whole life, and truly I think what I believed as a white American, who believes that police are inherently good and that they're the good guys. And again, I'm not saying that they're the bad guys, but I don't know if you remember that time where Reg came into Bible study and he was talking about how Reg is a buddy of ours, black dude that lives. At the time, he lived in Carlsbad. I don't know if he still does, but his car was broken into. Something was stolen out of his car. I don't know if you remember this. And Reg called the police, and he called the cops to have him come investigate who stole, who broke into his car, and to help him figure that stuff out. Which, pretty normal response to your car being broken into. Yeah. And he said within a few minutes, the cops started looking at things in his car, and then they realized that it was a BMW, and they started asking him questions like, yo, how did you afford this car? And where did you get this thing that's in here? And Reg was like, I had to look at these idiots and be like, yo, I'm the victim here.
I called you guys.
I called you. And I remember listening to that and listening to his story, and then it kind of started this conversation in the Bible study where every single black dude in the group started walking around, or not, just going and taking turns sharing their experiences of these crazy procedures of cops pulling them over for normal things and being pulled out of the car, or being asked if they were on probation, and being always seen as this deep criminal that was violent and hiding something. And I was like, man, cops with anything with me always assumed the best. There was multiple times where I should have gone to jail. They would just laughed it off, and they were like, have a good day. And I started, literally to say that my foundation was rocked is like the understatement of the year.
Wow.
Because I believed in the system where people were inherently good and cops treated everybody extremely equally. Right. And I started to listen to these stories, and I completely destroyed everything I had ever seen, and made me really question. And Glenn, bless his heart, helped me walk through a lot of this stuff. And there was multiple points where he would look at me and be like, yo, you're an effing racist. Like, you don't get it. And because I would push back against a lot of this stuff and go, no, that's not true, that's not right. And we, through a lot of really tough conversations, walk through this stuff. I remember when Glenn told me that
Glenn is Belief, by the way, guys, from Belief and Father.
Sorry, yeah, Belief. When him and Yvette told us that they were getting ready, or they were thinking about having the conversation with their kids, and this was a few years back, about police treating them differently. Yeah. I remember even in the moment, I adamantly disagreed with them. And I said, hey, this is furthering the problem, and at some point we have to stop this cycle, and we have to. And I remember Glenn pushed back and said, well, what do I do? Do I not say anything
Yeah.
and just let them experience the difference of how they're going to be treated and not be preempted by me? Or do I have the conversation? And then I just sat there and I said, man, as a dad with my own kids, this isn't even something that enters my thought process at all. Like I've never even considered having to have that conversation. And I, the cool part is belief in Yvette just actually recorded the video of them having that conversation with their kids. And
which went viral and they ended up on Oprah and the whole thing, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, but man, I'm telling you, me and my wife sat there, watched it, and literally cried, like heartbroken for these kids that their skin tone just happens to have more melanin than my kids, and my kids look at them, like they're friends. Those are their friends, and to think that somebody sees them as something other than just an innocent child is crazy.
And I think we started having these conversations years ago, before there was ever a Black Lives Matter, before there was ever a unrest or this stuff was mainstream. Back then this stuff wasn't cool to talk about, right? And it was definitely not cool to be the white ally who's trying to figure this stuff out, like, because you were completely disregarded by your white friends and family, and or you were fumbling through a lot of this stuff in real time and had your black friends looking at you like he was crazy racist. So there's this awkward tension that, like, I had walked through it a few years before, just kind of being around the spoken word community. So for me, I kind of understood a bit more at that time. And so I think it was a very interesting thing. So then when this stuff starts kind of rising to the surface, what was cool was that me and you specifically had these friends who were sheriffs, local sheriff department. And this is 2016, same kind of situation, heat of the election. You had the Philando Castile situation. You had all these back-to-back shootings that were viral. And me and you were able to kind of put together these, like, I don't know what they were, forums where these sheriffs can share some of their perspective and some of their questions. And then we brought, like, Reg and Belief and all these guys together. And talk a little bit about that, because I thought that was really cool, and I wish we would have. I don't know. I don't even know if there's anything we could do, but it definitely opened my eyes to some of the stuff law enforcement goes through, and I genuinely feel like a lot of what they were going through was also they were learning a lot about what black people go through. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Again, I think that the real tension that I lived in is, as a youth pastor in the area, I did a lot of work with the local sheriff's department, and I became friends with the guys, and a lot of them were Christian, loved Jesus, and were servants, and I thought did an incredible job at policing, were very vocal about the system of policing that they were involved in not working, of just arresting, putting kids in jail, getting out, and then eventually just arresting the same kids. And they were actively trying to create programs to actually help these kids get the tools to not have to be stuck in this system of incarceration just because they're poor and it's all that they know. And so I'm watching these guys living life with them, and they're just incredible humans who literally love Jesus. And I'm listening to that, and that's my picture of a cop, right? That's the face when somebody makes these statements, and I think it's something that we do on both sides of the fence that gets us in trouble, is we paint in these really broad strokes, and a lot of times we don't actually attach a face to the persona, right? That it's just all cops are bad, and I'm like, well, no, I know Todd, and I know these dudes that are awesome. Like, these guys are great guys. And then at the same time, I go to Bible study every Monday, and I listen to these conversations, and I listen to these stories of all of these guys that are my closest friends being treated brutally by police officers. And I literally didn't know how to reconcile the two. And so I just said, hey, what if we just had, a conversation, and everybody got put into a room, and we just kind of talked through this stuff, because I wanted, on both sides of the fence, I wanted these cops who were pretty adamantly opposed to the idea that people of color were treated differently, to hear the story of people who've been treated differently. Because these cops are like, yo, we've only been police officers in San Diego our whole life. We've never seen this stuff. I don't I don't get it. I don't understand it. And on the other side, I wanted, my buddies to go, look, there are cops who are good guys that are trying and are trying to do this right. And maybe somehow in the conversation we can find some type of middle ground or some type of humanity. And, again, I remember when the first conversation happened, and one of the things Reg said when he first got in is he said, dude, just pulling into the parking lot and seeing the cop cars. Like,
he was nervous.
He's like, I got super nervous just walking in the door. And I remember as everybody shared their stories, two of the cops literally started crying and just said, man, it breaks my heart that you're in my community and this community that I've given my life to protect. And this is how you feel when you get in the car in my community. Like that, I'm not okay with that. And again, I don't think we changed the world. There was no
we definitely didn't prevent what it came down eventually, but it was good to learn and understand what people go through and to hear people out, because I think so much of the time we don't get an opportunity to do that. And I think that was very, very helpful for me to understand better what law enforcement goes through. And I think for these guys who are legitimately great guys, like those dudes were super cool dudes, love Jesus, for them to kind of understand how black people feel and the stuff that they experience. And so where would you say, like, how would you describe kind of where you are now with regards to I guess the racial tensions, with you have these two opposing views, and there doesn't seem to be a ton of like middle ground. And I think a lot of what I'm pressing into here is to try and find middle ground. You know what I mean? So like, where would you say you are now? And then we'll take a couple questions and stuff too. So
again, I think I sit here today at 32 years old, realizing I know less than I feel like I ever have before, and that I shy away from ever trying to claim to be an expert on any of this stuff. But I think exactly like you said, I think part of my struggle is I don't feel like I fit in this whole debate. I was pastoring at a church that was predominantly white, predominantly wealthy, Republican, Bible-believing evangelicals. And it broke my heart that a lot of times that category typically means that we refuse to acknowledge any type of injustice taking place in the country today, that there's this deeply ingrained patriotism in our faith. And don't get me wrong, man, I think America is the greatest country in the world, and I love it to death, and I am forever grateful that I was born in this country. But I'm not the one that's going to say, hey, we don't have flaws, that there's things we need to work at. And so, I find myself very much in the middle. But again, I think it's an awkward tension that I find myself in a lot. I feel like if I say something, I'm going to say the wrong thing, and I'm going to get upset, And again, I think something that's super important for people is if you're in a position where you live life with people who don't look different than you, man, find some people who look different than you and just begin to live life with them. I think all of us do better when we're surrounded by people who think and sometimes even believe and look and act differently than we do. Now, that said, I think part of why we often just surround ourselves with people who think and look and act just like us is because sometimes there's some real tension when you're living life with people whose experiences aren't your experiences. And the funny part is you can attest to this, Ruslan was always like my safe place to ask racial tension questions, because he's like married to a black lady, has been in this conversation for much longer, and I knew I could ask really dumb questions, and I started to understand that I didn't know, but I didn't really have a safe place to ask dumb questions when it came to I think not just my faith, but because I did that for a long time too, but also with this with the racial tensions, you have to find people where it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to ask dumb questions. And I think a lot of times we have to understand and have empathy with each other and go, hey, look, it's not always arrogance. It's not always somebody just being a blatant racist. Sometimes it's just ignorance.
Yep.
It's just, I don't know what I don't know.
Right.
And we have to help each other get there. And I think our country would do, take leaps and bounds forward if we could just get people to empathize with each other, sit down and have some conversations.
Yeah.
And have a safe place to ask questions.
That's good, man. And I think that's for sure something that, again, I'm attempting to do with this channel. I'm attempting to do with the people in this community, is to have just like honest conversations so people can understand both sides. And so much of this is honestly based on our experiences, right? Like, had you not had the experience of being one of the few white guys in a predominantly black and Hispanic small group, that all these guys love Jesus, but you had this experience, and then you're hearing their experiences, that started to shape your worldview a little different. Where if you hadn't had that experience and you were completely in your own world, predominantly around people who are from the same socioeconomic status, same political leaning, so on and so forth, you probably wouldn't have been as empathetic and as sensitive. But you chose to expose and press into different people. You know what I'm saying? Different people and different views. And I think that is what we're kind of missing today. Brother Eden asked, as a pastor, has your faith been shaken because of the foundation has shifted for your congregation?
Again, I wouldn't say my faith has been shaken. I think that my faith in the deeply ingrained institution of Christianity inside of America has definitely been a bit shaken. I think sometimes we forget that the Savior that we read about in the Bible wasn't a white dude with, blonde hair and blue eyes, that he was a poor dude of color who was completely marginalized and preached a gospel that said that you and I are called to be the ones to stand up and be a voice for those that have no voice. And I think part of what I don't love today in the church is, even with this whole thing, I don't want to vilify, because I'm not at that church any longer, but I'm not there because of this stuff. But even with all this stuff, with the racial tension, our church essentially took the stance that our job is to pastor the local church, and because our church was a predominantly white group of people, we were going to more try to help them, figure out how to navigate through this, really without addressing any of the inherent biases, and trying to get them to understand, hey, here's maybe some reasons why people of color aren't comfortable in here. Because our young adults ministry, you come on a Thursday, there's a gang of multicultural people. Like you've been there, right? It is not just.
I was shocked to see black people, like a good amount of black people at your young adults group in Gilbert, Arizona.
And we were really intentional. Again, I think that Scripture is very clear that it's the combination of all of us together that makes up the manifold wisdom of God. Amen. And there will be a day when we stand in heaven and all tribes and all tongues are confessing that Jesus is Lord, and it'll be this beautiful thing. And I just don't think that the church is meant to be this segregated thing. That said, you have to be really, really intentional to not have church be segregated, because we as people really easily and naturally come to people that look and act and believe like us. And so that was part of my tension, is I would really try to push us on Sundays to go, man, it's hard when you walk in, and our auditorium at that point held 1,000 people, and you could count the people of color at every service on one hand. And even the people of color that were there, it was like they were the good black people that dressed nicely, and they were very whitewashed. And that was, we would pat ourselves on the back, like, look, man, we have people of color.
Diversity quota.
And I just was like, man, we're missing it. Like this isn't it. But
so let's talk about this. I think me and you would agree that we want equal opportunity for people, right? So your dad, coming from the south side of Chicago, had the opportunity to get into a college, to get out of that area, to become a defense attorney, and to build an amazing life for himself. So we would agree, hey, we want equal opportunity for people.
Yep.
At the same time, we don't believe in equal outcomes. We don't believe in socialism. We don't believe in, hey, we're just going to take from certain people and give to other people because that's the nice thing to do, right? So it's this balancing act of how does our society become more equal? And I think the answer to that is, first of all, it's a twofold answer. I think one, the first part of that answer is that we have to acknowledge that America is not a clean meritocracy, that everybody doesn't have access to the same education, everybody doesn't have access to the same opportunities, everybody doesn't have access, everybody's born in different families. Nobody gets to control what family they're born into, when they're born, what neighborhood, what local high school, what teachers are at that local high school, right?
Yeah.
There's so many things we don't get to control, but unfortunately sometimes the narrative, I guess, from the right would be, hey, we are we're hey, this is America. Look, if Oprah and Barack can make it, then shut up, stop complaining and having a victim mentality, and anybody can make it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and I did a whole video on like survivorship bias and how we only look at the survivors of these situations, but that there's a lot of people that grow up in impoverished areas, and I would say, like, man, but for my mom, who's not a Christian, like, but for her having the foresight to pull us out of the neighborhood I was in when I did get arrested for breaking and entering, and I was on probation, all these things. If it wasn't for her, like, I could have went down that same path, right? So, talk a little bit about your perspective of someone that comes from a wealthier family and how you view opportunity and work, opportunity and like nepotism, and opportunity, who what family you're born into, who you're connected with, versus meritocracy, which is like whoever's the best at something rises to the top.
Yeah. Again, the conversation on the right is what you addressed, but here's the narrative on the left, right? Is that it's all nepotism.
It's all nepotism. It's all rigged.
Yeah. It's all.
Yep.
So my dad,
which we don't agree with either.
Right. No. And again, I think my dad for me is a really interesting case study. Right. He's one of 7 kids. Dad worked 2 jobs his entire life. Never made, enough money to pay all their bills and have food on the table consistently. My dad had to work in high school just to help his family eat. And he'll say that when he had a teacher in high school that finally challenged him to think and kind of told him, dude, your only way out of this is education.
Yeah.
Like, your only way out of this is your mind. And my dad will say one of the best things that happened to him is that he was so poor, he qualified for all kinds of grants to go to college.
Right.
And, so he ended up doing his undergrad. And then literally part of the reason he went to law school is because there was other grants that were available to, poor people that were from a certain area to go on to law school. He was like, man, if you're going to keep paying me to go to school,
just keep going.
I'll just keep going to school because I don't have to get a job. And but again, like, is my dad an attorney just because he was a white person? My dad's the only one in his family that is college educated. He's the only one in his family that has broken out of the cycle of poverty that they have been stuck in generationally since we immigrated over from Ireland.
Yeah.
Now, again, I definitely believe that there is some nuanced stuff in there, and that, there might have been job interviews that he went on as a new attorney that he might have gotten a foot in the door because his name is also my name. It's Dan, and, was a white dude. But he worked his tail off, his butt off to get himself through law school, and really his only goal was to have our experience as kids not be his experience as a kid. And so it's really interesting to listen to his childhood compared to ours, right, where we have this childhood, and not the early years we were kids, but by the time we were, cognizant of what was happening. I mean, I was in private golf lessons my whole life, you know, getting new golf equipment all the time. And that was our normal. When I was in high school, when I turned 16, my parents took me to a car dealership, and I got to pick whatever car I wanted off the lot, drive it home. I had a credit card that paid for gas, and I just thought that was normal. Like that's how you paid for stuff. You just have your parents' credit card, and you know, you kind of get to do whatever you want. And so the irony for me is, as somebody who really was handed everything, you know, I could choose whatever school I wanted to go to, I could whatever, you know, it wasn't like it just led to all this success. I had to kind of hit my own rock bottom to actually get to a point where my parents financially were like, dude, we're done paying for your life. Like,
cut you off.
You're a train wreck, and we're not supporting this mess any longer. That it was at that point that I realized, man, I've got to do something. And I've got to begin to work. Now, I think here's some of I think there's a lot of nuance in this stuff, right? I think one of the nuanced things is when you have resource behind you and you have families that have resources, I think it's easier to bounce back, right? Because all I had to do was get my life back on track for a little bit, and then all of a sudden I had access to the resources again, and college was paid for, and
you had a financial safety net
for sure. It didn't
and a social safety net, right? Like you had a father who cared, you had a mother who cared. I'm assuming there's other uncles in a community that cared and supported you, and then there was also the financial safety net.
Well, again, and I think the other biggest difference is even a psychological safety net. I had been told my entire life, you can be anything you want. Do you want to be a doctor? Do you want to be a lawyer? Do you want to be, like, I grew up thinking, man, I can do anything. Like the world is at my fingertips, and I am really smart, and I am just this unique butterfly that brings all this value to the world. And then, you know, and I was pretty smart in high school, and then I got to college and realized, man, I don't know crap, and there's a lot of really smart people out there.
Well, you know what the crazy part is, just to piggyback that idea, is I didn't necessarily grow up with like that type of affirmation, definitely not from my father, but my son definitely gets that, and I love the fact that your father did that for you. But what's wild to think about is that there are people who grow up without that hope, right?
Sure.
And all of this really starts, I think, with what do you believe about the world? Like, what do you believe about the world? What do you believe about yourself? What do you believe about these things? And what you believe is going to dictate in a lot of ways how you behave. So if you believe that, man, you know, I'm this unique person with limitless potential. I tell my son every day, you know, you're created in the image of God, right? If you believe that, then even if you make some bad decisions, you know you can bounce back. You know that there's this safety net. And unfortunately, and we've both met people who come either from poverty or whatever that they just don't believe that, right? And whether that's because of their physical environment, the proximity of what they grew up in, the people they grew up around or whatever, or it's because of whatever the media and the narrative of the media or something they learned in school, there's people that don't believe that, right? There's people that don't believe that they can be successful. Like they believe the system is rigged, the game is rigged, the little man can't get ahead, so on and so forth, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. 100%. And there's obviously, you know, inequalities, right? Obviously, not everybody has access to the same opportunities. Not everybody has access to the same education, even, you know. That's why I would agree with like a school voucher system, right? So that people can choose the school they want to go to. Kids can choose the school they want to go to. And we need more stuff like that so the schools can compete. We have better education. But that's just wild just to pause and think. Those of you guys that think it's a completely clean meritocracy, that's not... The people don't just start with believing that. Like, people don't start that they can work hard and get ahead. Like, not everybody thinks that and was taught that.
Yeah, 100%. I think as a youth pastor, that's the most heartbreaking kid, you know, that doesn't realize, hey, again, just the fact that we're my wife and I are watching this show on Netflix right now that's literally heartbreaking, and it's kind of it's watching and documenting ICE as they transition from the Obama era protocols for immigration to the Trump ones. And because essentially what Obama was doing was, unless you were committing crimes, we weren't going to come and try to find you and deport you.
Yeah.
Trump came into office and said, we're deporting everybody. And so ICE is literally going around and they're just deporting everybody. And I think sometimes the right paints this picture where it's like, yeah, let's get all the illegals out. It's all the bad people and they came into our country, do it legally, and and you never put a human behind it.
Yep.
And I mean, go watch this show on Netflix. It's literally there's been a couple episodes we've watched and just the episode ends and you turn off the TV and you just sit there like, damn. It's heavy because it's a dad who's trying to provide for his kids, and literally them ripping away the dad from this family, and this guy is going to work and he's not committing crimes, and it's not this evil, terrible, mean person. It's some dude that's doing the jobs that you and I don't want to do, trying to work hard and escape this horrible situation. And I say all that to say, I think often we forget that, man, we have, just by the sheer fact, almost every time we watch this show, I sit there and I just go, God, thank you for allowing me the privilege of being born into a country where, yes, there's lots of flaws, there's lots of things that could be better, but damn, man, we have an opportunity to pursue freedom and liberty and opportunity. Like that is something that so many people are dying just to try to get to be a part of.
What's the show called again? Somebody asked in the comments.
I don't know, but I can look it up and I'll tell you in a second.
Well, the interesting thing is, you said, praise God, for the opportunity to be born in a country where we have the right to pursue life, liberty, pursue the happiness, right? This whole thing. The interesting part about that is we didn't choose to be here.
Nope.
Right? My parents chose. They had the opportunity to apply for different visas, refugee visas, and we ended up here, but I didn't choose to come to America. It wasn't like I made this decision, right? And you didn't choose to come here, right? You didn't work for it. Like, it literally was like just you and God and universe was like plump, you know what I'm saying? And the wild part about that is how much we overlook that. Just the fact where you're born. Like, we could have been born in freaking China. We could have been born in North Korea. Like, we could have been born somewhere where we had zero opportunity, right? Literally, you do what is put in front of you. Not to say they have zero opportunity in China, but I mean, it's a communist nation, right? So, what was that show? I think you said you just pulled it up. Yeah.
So if you, I mean, I would encourage everybody. Just know it's a bit depressing. It's hard to even say that though. How do you say a show is depressing? Don't watch it when it's a reality of what's happening in our country. It's called Immigration Nation on Netflix, and it's heartbreaking to watch the dehumanity that takes place. Not just even in the immigrants that they're deporting, but even the ICE agents. Like, watching them where they're like, man, we're just doing our job, and they talk, the ICE agents are like, I was blown away at how they even filmed it. Like, how the hell did they get access to it? If I was Trump, I'd be like, nah, don't film this. Like, this is we're gonna let this shit live in the dark. Like, we don't want people to know we're doing this. But they're filming it. And these ICE agents are talking about how the beginning part's really hard, and you cry, and it's really difficult to rip a kid away from their parent as the kid's literally crying like, I'm never gonna see my dad again, he's gonna get executed if he gets brought back, and that's tough in the beginning, but you get past that. And you just sit there and go, man, I don't know if we as humans are supposed to live in a place where we've gotten past that, and that's like this new normal. And you watch it. There's a lady who has kids, and she's talking about the fact that her kids are at home and this tension of having to rip kids away. But at the end of the day, she goes, but it's just a job, and we are just fulfilling policy. We're just doing what we're told to do. But there's other ICE agents that are at these rallies that are like, hey, this is wrong, this is corrupt, where they've actually walked away from the agency and said, yes, I know it's a great job and I get this federal, salary and pension and all these benefits, but you're asking me to do something that is completely against who I am. So all that to say, if you're like the super, super gnarly right-wing guy that's like, we got to get rid of all the immigrants in our country, go watch that. I would encourage you to watch that and sit back and go, yes, I think what we should do, and again, what I'm not trying to say is that we
Open
just have
borders!
Exactly. Here comes the comments, right? Open borders. You just want open borders, and this is America. I think often what we think is we find the one guy, right? The one dude that comes into the country and commits a crime. And we go, they're all criminals.
Right.
And it's like, nah, man, most of these are really hardworking people who love their families, who just want a place for their kids to grow up and not be forced into sex trafficking or slavery or the drug business. And something that was given to my kids based on nothing that they have earned.
Genetic lottery.
Just happened to be born here.
Yeah.
Something that I would, as a dad, I would fight like hell to give for my kids. These dads are doing that, and they're, the irony is they're paying taxes, right? These aren't avoiding taxes people. They pay taxes, yet a lot of times they don't get to take advantage of the benefits that come from the systems we have in place that are paid for and funded by our tax dollars because they are illegal. And I think sometimes we, on all of these issues, we think it's binary. It's one or the other. We paint in these broad strokes and just come through here illegal or legally, right? Like my grandparents came here legally. It's like, I'll tell you, my great-grandfather who emigrated into America, the first generation from Ireland, did not come here legally. He was smuggled by the Catholic Church to escape being
Your
put in
grandfather was
prison.
an illegal immigrant.
Yeah, straight up. Yeah.
Whoa.
But, back then, the process of getting into the country and getting citizenship was a lot easier, right? But yeah, literally was smuggled here by the Catholic Church. The IRA was getting crushed, and he was put in prison and had the choice to essentially sit in prison in Ireland or flee the country and get smuggled out. Comes here illegally, establishes this, family that's here now, and for whatever reason, we're born into this country.
Yeah. One of the things you said is not everything is binary, right? That there is nuance. And even if you talk to people from other countries, other parts of the world, they seem to be way more pragmatic and reasonable, like with the way they navigate these conversations. You know what I'm saying? The way they navigate these conversations, the way they talk about these things. And I'm hoping that we can push people into more nuanced places, into more it's not either or, right? It's not either or. Here's a great example. Travis, I'll give you a real example. So Travis brought up the point, and this is irrelevant, but I'm just gonna give you a very simple example, right? So his critique is, you're talking how we would say ICE and immigration was more human, and what would the word we would say? Just it just made I feel like the policies were more pragmatic, right? Not deporting people who were not committing crimes, who are not wilding out, right? Yeah. What's the point? Like, it seems like it takes more resources, right? That's a very reasonable, pragmatic. Again, that we're not saying open borders. I'm not saying any of that. But so his pushback. This is Travis' pushback, and I'm not trying to pick on you, Travis, but he said, how about all of the aborted babies by the Obama's administration advances, including using taxpayer money to fund them overseas? So one, I'm not for the use of tax funding to give money to Planned Parenthood so they could fund abortions. One, so don't generalize that if I agree with Obama on this, that now I endorse everything he does, right? Because who does that? Like, who literally endorses everything somebody does that they like in a form? So one, that's a slippery slope. Two, if you actually look, and this is going to be challenging, Travis, so just brace yourself. If you actually look at the abortion rates under Obama's policies, historic low abortion rates. Historic, lower than under Reagan, which was an evangelical Christian pro-life candidate, lower than under Bush the first, Bush the second. Lowest historical abortion rates in history. So that begs the question, well, is it about the symbolic nature of how someone says they're pro-life, or is it actually about policies that can help eliminate as many unwanted pregnancies so that people don't feel like they have to have abortions? And if you've ever talked to anybody who's had an abortion and actually talked them through it, yes, people have abortions for awful reasons, but a lot of people have abortions because they feel like there's no other option, right? And whether that's right or wrong, clearly it's wrong, but that's, again, what you believe is how you behave. If you believe that there's no other option, guess that's what's going to happen, right? So I've been repeatedly outspoken about being being pro-life, about criticizing Planned Parenthood, about criticizing politicians who, you know, propel these things. But you also have to look at the raw number, and that's one of those things where, like, yeah, that guy pro-life, pro-choice, pro-life. Like, it's not that binary, because it's very difficult to explain that. Explain that to me. You can't. Why? Well, if you look at, one, the economic policies under Obama, and two, if you look at the preventative measures under Obama to prevent unwanted pregnancies, stuff like birth control, which Catholics and Christians freak out about, stuff like condoms, stuff like giving these kids the resources so that they don't get pregnant, have proven way lower abortion rates than under Republican pro-life candidates.
Yeah, well, again, I think a lot of times, and this is obviously a big issue for people in the church, right? And I would say there's a lot of people that are single issue voters,
Yep.
this being a big one, right? I don't care who the candidate is, if they're not pro-life, we're not voting for them. And the irony is, man, if you look back, there's been all kinds of Republican candidates that were very much pro-choice and then realized, oh, I need to placate to the evangelical base, so now I'm pro-life. I'm pro-life. Hell yeah, I've been pro-life my whole life.
Yep.
And so again, Travis, I love the point, because as a pastor and a lover of humanity, I believe that every child is born on purpose, that God has a destiny for them, and there was nothing accidental about their birth. Now here becomes the issue, right? I think the war on drugs has proven something powerful to us, right?
Yeah.
Just because you criminalize something doesn't mean that it stops.
Yeah.
And this is the messy part when it comes to even Roe v. Wade, right? It's like, hey, let's get politicians into, or get Supreme Court justices that will finally overturn it and make it illegal. And it's like, just because we make abortions illegal doesn't mean they're going to stop.
Yep.
What's probably going to happen is women are going to do what they did, you know, in the 1700s. They're going to go back to all kinds of shady doctors doing them in their basements, or try and do it themselves, because a lot of these women that are having these abortions are doing it out of complete and utter desperation.
Yeah.
And I, as somebody who is very much pro-life, and I would love the opportunity to sit and talk to any woman that's pregnant that is considering this. And part of what I don't love about Planned Parenthood is that even me, I was a 20-year-old. You were around, right? My 18-year-old girlfriend, I get her pregnant. My wife went to Planned Parenthood thinking that it was a place where you plan how you're going to do your parenthood, right? Hey, what are my options? I think I'm pregnant. How do we figure this out? And they just were like,
Option
okay,
one.
here's your, when you want to schedule your abortion. And my wife's like, abortion?
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
You know?
I needed some prenatal pills. What are y'all talking about?
Like, that wasn't, do you know what I mean? And it was this really eye-opening moment for her to realize, like, yo, this isn't a place where we plan parenthood. We just abort babies. Yeah. And I wish that in Planned Parenthood there was more education, and there was more, hey, there's other options, and this isn't. And again, I think the huge lie that's being perpetrated in our country right now is that abortion is a painless option that leaves no lasting consequences. This is your easy choice, right? Hard choice, have the baby. Easy choice, get rid of it. And the truth is, you have two hard choices. You have two really tough choices. And as somebody who has been a young adult pastor, this is something that is very real to people we've walked through life with. And, you know, and we've been really honest with them and told them, hey, look, an unplanned, untimely pregnancy when you're this young, take it from somebody who had a, you know, kid when he was 20 and his girlfriend was 18. It's not easy. Like, that crap is not something that's simple, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
But you better not believe the lie that killing that baby, killing that child, which is what it is going to be any easier, right? Yeah. And so again, all that to say, we usually put these lines in the ground, and we draw these lines in the sand, and we go, well, I have to be pro-life and I have to be pro-choice. And I go, well, I think there's a lot of us that go, man, I don't want to see babies killed. Yeah. But I think we also need to have policies in place that allow people the opportunity to be educated about the alternatives. Yeah. And I think sometimes we get so stuck in this one thing. I guarantee you right now, if we were to criminalize all abortions, the abortion rates would not drop that much. I think they would just go underground and become a lot less safe for women. And again, as somebody that wants to see children have an opportunity and to see our nation come back to a place where we think of children as a blessing and not a burden, right? And again, a lot of these issues we're struggling with is just the progression of sin and depravity in us as humans, right? We're in a place where we just don't see value. We see kids as a burden, and Scripture is abundantly clear. It doesn't matter even when it happens. Children are always a blessing, and they're an incredible blessing for anybody that's ever struggled with infertility and has tried to work so hard to have a child. The thought and the concept of somebody just going out and eliminating this life that was created, this literal miracle, when you look at the timing and all the things that had to line up in that one little sperm that had to travel all the way there and get the one egg that had to then implant, and it's literally a miracle. And we look at it and just go, it's cool, it's easy. So again, I think just another issue proving a point to go, hey, there's a really healthy middle ground that I think we can find and live in, but it requires us having discussions. It requires us having conversations, which we don't do well.
Hard conversations, and to your point, so much of this is people's environments and what they're exposed to. Thank you, DJ All-Star. He said 1 to 400 trillion chance of you being born. That's crazy, those odds, right? So like what a miracle life in and of itself is. And then especially if anybody that's actually been there and saw their kids be born, like that is
crazy.
Like that is crazy. Miracle. Like, wow, if you don't believe in God and you watch a birth and you're there for the birth of your child, you definitely like something's going to go off. But I think where I'm at with a lot of this stuff is like, hey, if you truly care, right? If you truly care about the unborn, right? Or about prison reform, mass incarceration. If you truly care about, right? Here's a big one. We always hear this one. Black Lives Matter. What about black on black crime? Right? We hear that a lot, right? From our good Republican friends. And I think if you truly care, are you seeking opportunities to help create opportunity for people who maybe don't look like you or haven't had the advantages that you had? You know, because I think that is where I feel like we can level the playing field. See, I'm not banking on the government to step in and be like, we're going to create a social program that's going to give everybody a shot to be a millionaire. I just don't believe in that. I believe in private citizens, because we're good people and we have Jesus in us, and maybe we have some specific knowledge or we understand how life works, and we've been down and we've gotten up and we figured it out. I'm looking for those of us to understand that it is to a degree our moral obligation to say, hey, I do have a degree of privilege, right? And it's not to say it's not to like go into like white privilege or anything, but I do have a degree of privilege as somebody that's an American citizen, as somebody that's able-bodied and of sound mind, as somebody who has had an amazing church family and had amazing church fathers, spiritual fathers in my life that took the place of my dad when he wasn't there, that helped form me and helped me become a man. I do have a degree of moral obligation to help create opportunity for other people. If I truly care about people having abortions, I should care about what those babies turn out when they're 18, 19, 20, right? Yeah. And for me, it's very tangible. Like, it's very, like, you didn't see my niece. My niece lives here. You know what I'm saying? She's a foster kid. Yeah. You know, it's real deal. Like, I get to be a father, right, in a way, to my niece. And we're sitting here and we're talking about her budget, and we're talking about her getting the Robinhood app. And she's 19 years old, right? And so we're like, I got her jobs, and I'm helping. I'm doing the very best that I can.
But be honest, did you send her your Robinhood code so you got the free stock?
Actually, I didn't. I did. I really did. I did that to you. I did that to you. I did not do that to her. I just told her to download the app. I should have, though. I'm gonna see if I can still make that happen. Thank you for reminding me. The Robinhood app, by the way, is in the description if you guys want to sign up and get a free stock.
It is pretty dope.
$100. But you see what I'm saying? So, like, to me, when I look at Matthew 25, right? When I look at Matthew 25, and you got the parable of the virgins, and Jesus basically saying, like, hey, be prepared, right? Have your oil ready, be prepared for when I come back. And then from that, it goes into the parable of the talents, right? One has 3, one has 5, one has 3, one has 1, and the guy who has a lot recoups and invests and makes account, and right. Hopefully most of you guys have heard the parable of talents, and then from right there it goes into the parable of the least of these, right? Which is, we always gloss over that this is one long thought Jesus had. This wasn't like hey, like, I'm going to tell this story and then I'm going to go have dinner and come back and tell a different story. Like, no, this is one long part. And I recommend all you guys, regardless of where you are on this thing, right, read Matthew 25 and you'll see in real time the spiritual aspect of being prepared spiritually, making sure you're saved and you know God, one, right, which is with the first parable. The get your house in order and be financially responsible, which is the parable of the talents. And then why? So that you can be a blessing to the least of these. Who are the least of these? Jesus said, when you visited me in prison, you fed me, you clothed me, right? And they said, we never did these things for you. And he's like, whenever you've done these things to the least of these, you've done them unto me. Well, guess what? You need to have abundance and access to take. Have you guys ever visited somebody in prison? Like, that's like a 30-minute lunch break thing. You got to have a whole day in your schedule to go and visit somebody in prison. You ever clothed somebody? Have you ever actually bought a full wardrobe for somebody? Like, that requires abundance. That requires responsibility. And so what I'm not saying is like Jesus was this like pure capitalist and all. Like, that's not to say that, but it's to say, hey, we have to be ready spiritually, but then we have to be ready financially and physically, so that we could be a blessing to the least of these. And if you are just here and you have this cold-hearted, life is a clean meritocracy, and people need to stop being victims, and da-da-da-da. And if you truly believe that, and it's not just some crap your parents taught you, and you just a Republican because your parents are Republican, or you're right, but you really believe that, you have a degree of a moral obligation to use your, I'll stop using the word privilege, to use your wealth, your abundance, your positioning in life to help other people. You do, right? And it's that simple. And that looks different for you. It look like literally you were in ministry pastoring people, right? Yeah. What are your thoughts about all that? I know I just said a whole lot.
Yeah. Again, I think sometimes we forget, and I am of thought that I think the majority of people are good, and the majority of people are after the same thing.
Yep.
I think the thing that plagues a lot of us is ignorance more than arrogance. Mm-hmm. I've been working pretty closely with this guy named Zach, and man, Zach is a phenomenal dude. Really, really good dude. Mm-hmm. The more I know his story, very similar to mine. Mm-hmm. He's kind of found himself in this position with all of this racial tension, and man, he just doesn't know. His experience is very similar to mine. He's never had people that look different than him live life with him, and he's made these statements that on the onset are kind of offensive and are very shrouded with ignorance. And some people would just go, man, you're a racist. And he's not. And I've slowly been able to send him things and to challenge some things that he says, and get him to kind of look at the other side of the coin and to realize, like, man, okay, just because this isn't my experience doesn't mean that it's not somebody's experience. Yeah. And so all of that to say, I think all of us have a responsibility. All of us have a platform. All of us have influence. Yep. We just have to be willing to use it. Yep. And I've gotten to a spot now where I'm comfortable having these more uncomfortable conversations because I've walked through the dumb stuff and I've said the dumb things. And I also understand that somebody has to say this stuff. And part of what I mean, it's even the graphic that I was showing you when I first got here. There's this graphic going around about this little white kid that was killed by apparently a black guy walked up and shot him and killed him.
Tragic.
Tragic. Horrible.
North Carolina. Right? Horrible. The neighbor who the dad had just invited over like the night before for dinner. Yeah, so horribly tragic. 5-year-old kid, which my son is 5. Yeah,
I mean, literally horrible. And probably the person that killed him probably is not all the way there. There's probably some major mental issues, but there's this graphic going around that I've seen shared by people, a lot of people from churches that I've pastored at, that has a graphic, and right next to it, next to this boy who's been killed by a black person, and how there's no national outcry, next to George Floyd, who was a drug addict who overdosed, and he overdosed while resisting arrest. He's some hero, but now the nation's quiet because of this.
That's what the meme says.
That's what the meme says. And I've seen it, and I was like, the first time I saw it, I was like, man, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But now it's gaining traction, right? And I've seen 4, 5, 6 posts of this thing. And I finally was like, man, you know what? This is dumb. This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Yeah. And I also feel a bit of a responsibility to say, here's why it's really dumb. Yeah. Because I, as a white person, can say these things and not come across as just the angry black man. And so I feel a bit of a responsibility to go, look, this is really dumb, and here's why. Number one, George Floyd was not killed. He did not die from an overdose, right? He was literally murdered. And even if he was on drugs, even if he was a violent offender and had this crazy rap sheet of a past, the cops don't know any of that when they're arresting him. And even if they do, it doesn't mean he deserves to die, because a cop is not judge and jury and executioner. He's there to enforce the law and to keep the peace, supposedly. That dude was murdered. He had a knee on his back for 20 minutes. And then in the case of this white kid that's murdered, tragic, horrible circumstances and situations, but the perpetrator of that crime is already arrested. Right. The criminal justice system, I promise, is going to do what our criminal justice system in America does really well, and is going to sentence and punish the black man who committed the crime and sentence him to a long-term in prison. The reason there's no national outcry is because justice is taking place. The reason that there's this national outcry taking place in the instance of George Floyd is because there is not justice. There's not a sense of morality. We've watched this story play out time and time and time again, and the cop gets off with self-defense, or I was afraid,
he felt threatened,
or I felt threatened, and I felt scared. And so now we find ourselves in this position. All of that to say, I saw this graphic, and I know that I have friends that are watching this same graphic, and they're going, man, this isn't stopping. People don't understand what we're fighting for, yet they're almost voiceless to say anything. And I find myself, again, I know people struggle with the word privilege, but I find myself in this position of having a platform, of having influence, and having privilege. I can post that, and nobody's going to think that I'm just some angry black guy at the end of the day, because I'm not black, right? And I can, in that very simple, really almost seemingly insignificant way, be a voice to the voiceless. And I think that's what we're called to do.
Like you said, I'm going to repost this, but you said, if you're sharing this graphic, you are an idiot. Number one, George Floyd didn't die from an overdose, and just because he had a past doesn't mean that he deserved to die. By the way, I got friends that were in Bible studies with George Floyd. So that, that's the whole, he was this crazy guy or whatever. Obviously he had a past, obviously he had a record, but that to me is just very... goodness gracious, and I got buddies who would have done ministry with him. You know what I mean? So this is a Christian brother.
Well, the truth, dude, this would be the equivalent of me getting arrested, me getting killed, and then afterwards going, man, he had drug offenses when he was 20 years old. That's just, does that mean you deserve to die? Right? It's the craziest thing in the world for me. It's all of a sudden we bring out their past that justifies what happens years and years later.
Yeah, and then the second part you said was the reason there isn't a national outcry about Canon Hinnant is because the justice system worked. His killer's already behind bars, and I'm sure he will be convicted like the system's supposed to work. Sharing this graphic makes you look hella racist. Seems like you just want the story to switch back to black people being the violent ones, which I think is completely appropriate to say that. And sometimes you got to use harsh words to communicate these ideas. Here's the deal. And I could even see some of you guys wanting to over-spiritualize this, right? And I think in order to get to the spiritual issue, which I've gotten to a ton of times, right? We obviously agree Jesus is the ultimate solution, but you first have to acknowledge that there's an issue. And we still have a fragment of the population that just doesn't even want to acknowledge that there are disparities, whether that's wealthy versus poor versus rich, black versus white, whatever. There's still disparities. And in order for us to progress and move forward, there has to be at least an acknowledgement, right? And so ignoring the issues isn't going to deal with issues. Having a healthy, balanced, nuanced perspective, biblical conversation about what Jesus said about people who are oppressed, what the Bible says about the book of Isaiah, Proverbs, like there's a lot in there about helping people who need your help, right? There's a lot in there about that. And to gloss over that stuff and to just assume it's all spiritual and we just need to talk about the spiritual component of it, I think does a disservice to address the very real nature, because Jesus addressed very real, tangible, physical, cultural things. If we look at the parable of the Good Samaritan, that was a culturally wild parable for him to tell, because the Samaritans and the Jewish people did not get along, and yet he positions the Samaritan as the righteous one, as the hero in the story, which was very polarizing. So I think we don't need to just spiritualize it and go, well, what's the spiritual side? No, there's a physical side that we do need to acknowledge, and yes, ultimately the solution is spiritual, but we have to say, hey, in order for us to be the solution, to be people who love our neighbor as ourselves, to be more empathetic, to pray for our enemies, people we disagree with, we first have to acknowledge that, hey, there's some division here as a country that we're dealing with. How do we find common ground? How do we have these conversations? How do we listen and seek to understand before seeking to be understood? And I think that is where our heart should be with regards to just these sensitive topics, and just to know, to kind of bring it full circle, like, is America a clean meritocracy? It's not. It's not. It has a lot to do, and even in my music career, like, guys, like in my music career, I didn't come into this thing with a ton of relationships. I didn't come into this thing with a whole bunch of connections, right? And you see people who do, and they level up, right? And so, like, if you think that life is a pure meritocracy, and the people who do the best, who are the best at something, are the most successful, that's not how it works in most fields, like in the majority of fields, because it's about your community, your network. Are you likable? Are you friendly? Do people want to be in your presence? There's so many things that go into these things that to just dismiss it and say, well, hey, you know what? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Figure it out, man. It is
dumb.
Very dumb, very insensitive. And it doesn't do a whole lot for the gospel, guys. Just so you know, like telling that to somebody doesn't win them over to want to hear more about this Jesus, because that Jesus sounds not like the Jesus of the Bible, right? Yeah. Blessed are those who are poor. Blessed are those who are weary. Like, for me, they'll find peace. Like, this is a Jesus who is very in tune with people's pain and people hurting, and this is stuff I struggle with, like on an emotional level, like really being able to feel people. So, any final thoughts, man? And we're going to wrap up.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to play devil's advocate a little bit against that point, I also think that we don't live in this world that a lot of people, more so on the left, think we live in, where it's all just based in nepotism.
Yeah.
It's all, it's all about your parents and passing it down, and then your uncle gets you this job. And man, as somebody who, again, 20 years old, gets his 18-year-old girlfriend pregnant, the greatest thing that ever happened is I landed through a relationship, right? I had a friend that got me in, but I had to actually, win in the interview.
Yeah.
But I got myself a sales job, right? And the beauty in sales is it's one of the few fields where it is very merit-based, right?
Yeah.
You work hard, you sell, you're going to make more money than your coworkers.
Yep.
And within 2 or 3 months, I was one of the top sales guys in the country, and people kept asking me, how are you doing this? How are you able to get these numbers? And I'm sitting there like, I'm 20 years old, surrounded by all these other 20-year-olds. Their only goal is to get a BMW and an 80-inch TV and, to live this life. And I'm like, I've got a kid to feed, man. Like, I got to figure out how to make more than the $12 an hour I'm making more, so I have to hustle. And so all of that to say, hard work and all of that stuff also does open up
Absolutely.
a bunch of doors where all of a sudden you find yourself outworking all the people around you, and you're in the top percentage in the company. All of a sudden people realize, they start to recognize who you are, and you get to go on these trips, and you're rubbing nose. That was, again, the part where I think it is this perfect blend, where it was my achievement that got me this trip where all of the big ups were going to be on these, annual trips. What I didn't realize at the time, because I was a dumb, ignorant kid, is I was like, yo, I'm about to be on this vacation with my wife. The company's paying for it. But these trips really were an opportunity to brown nose the big ups who were essentially going to handpick the people that they liked to promote. Where I was sitting there like, no, it's just merit based, and I outsell everybody, and I'm the best, and it's all because of what I do that they're going to promote me. And I started watching people that were garbage get promoted over me. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And I didn't realize that it's, yes, there is merit to this, and you have to be good enough, but you also have to play the game if you want to, move up this ladder. And so
that's so good. Well, just to recap, you got your foot in the door because your relationships, right? So let's not ignore that. Then you crushed it because of your merit, right? But then you kind of dropped the ball and thought it was all about merit, right? And it was, if I look at me in basketball, same thing. Like my mom positioned me to live across the street from a hoop, so I got really good at basketball, and I was like really good for where I was at in 8th grade. I was like the tallest kid in my class, and I was like, okay, I'm good, and I like dominated in this rec league, and I was just dominating. And then I got into like the teams, the 8th grade team, the freshman team, and I realized that I'm one of the better kids on the team, but because I'm difficult and I don't understand teamwork, and I didn't have no siblings, I'm an only child, and like the future of my basketball career came apart because I didn't understand this very dynamic you're talking about. And so I think that's so dope, man. And so guys, just to give you guys some hope, just regardless on where you come from, just here's some basic things, right? Meritocracy is believing that only like hard work is what rises to the top. Those who work hard, those who are the most talented, those who are the most merit-based rises to the top. The opposite of meritocracy is nepotism, which is you put your family on. And so those are the two opposing views. You put your family on, you put your friends on. Here's the truth. If you are in poverty, or if you grew up poor, if you do these three things, you can break into the middle class, right? If you graduate high school, if you wait until you're 21 to get married and then have kids after, you totally screwed that up, right? You wait till you're 21 to get married, then have kids after high school, and work a full-time job. 97% of people who do these things break into the middle class. So that just hopefully gives you guys some hope, right? Don't have any freaking kids, right, outside of marriage. That is a huge thing that really derails a lot of people's lives. Wait until you get married, wait until you're a little older, boom, work full-time. That'll break you into the middle class. Those of you guys that think like the game is rigged, it's so bad, the wealthy just the rich keep getting richer. Here's a fact. 80% of America's millionaires are first generation rich. 80% of people who have $1 million net worth, they did not inherit it. They worked their behind off. They saw value in some sector to add value in. They had scarce skills, and they hustled, and they built relationships, and they were friendly, and they leaned into their network, and all these different things, right? That these people really seized the opportunities that were in front of them, and 80% of America's millionaires are first generation rich. So why does this matter? Again, go back and read Matthew 25, right? Read Matthew 25. If you live in America in 2020, you are able-bodied, of sound mind, you have a vast opportunity to help people. And to squander that help by over-spiritualizing it and thinking that it's cool to be poor, and that it's cool to struggle, and that it's cool to be depressed, and that it's cool to be a loser, and that the game is rigged, you are doing nobody a service. You're not helping, you're not adding value, you're not benefiting anybody, right? And so that's kind of where I want you guys just to know, man, it's both. It's not either or. It doesn't have to be binary. It's both. And connecting with different people, meeting different people is valuable. Having scarce skills. Do you have the ability to sell? It's a very important skill set in this climate that a lot of people don't know how to communicate. A lot of people don't know how to persuade, right? And then you take this ability to sell, and you were able to use it, and God kind of deposited that in you. You refined it, and it became a teaching gift and a preaching gift, right? And so hopefully that encourages you guys, man. I think you're totally right. I think it's both, right? And I think the way you literally fleshed that out, where you were the guy that was 20 years old, and let's not forget, you had motivation.
Yeah.
Because you knew, holy crap. Maybe you didn't know that statistic, but you knew, whoa, I got this baby, and I'm in some murky water, and my life and I could be poor. Like, I could potentially be poor if I don't get my ish together. Yeah. So there was also the real deal motivation, which unfortunately, a lot of 18 to 25-year-olds that could actually, like, implement this stuff and go crush it, they're not thinking like that. They don't have they have the time, but not the motivation, right? Yeah. And though a lot of you guys who have the motivation, the family, the kids, the wife, you don't have the time, right? So it becomes this tough balancing act to really level up. So anyway, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No. Yeah, again, just a privilege to be there. I would challenge whichever side of the fence you find yourself on any issue. Even if you are convinced you're 100% correct, find somebody that believes the opposite, sit down, take them to coffee, and go, man, help me understand why you see this issue this way. And really hear them. And I promise you'll start to realize that we have way more in common than we do apart. And I think that most people are inherently good that are after the same thing, and we can together collectively really make a difference and make this an incredible place to live and to be and operate as humans.
Yeah, man. Dude, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Hey, man, if you guys are watching this, again, thank you so much. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe notification bell, and we'll be back again. I'm sure I'll have Daniel on the channel again to hang out with us. You guys could follow him at Daniel M. Golding on Instagram. And yeah, man, appreciate you guys being here with us. This was fun. I had a blast. I've been trying to get this dude to come over for like weeks to do this with me. So super pumped, man. You guys be blessed. Peace.